Thank you, everyone. It's a real privilege to be here today because I get to share with you the next 20 minutes my dreams, my hopes for science communication in Asia. And I believe that many of you in the audience also share my dreams. So let's make it reality together. I'm going to speak slowly because I understand that this talk will be translated into Japanese, so I'll do my best. For those of you who are biologists in the audience, you may be familiar with the term wild type, so that's the moniker that our group is named after. Imagine yourself walking down a very busy road in Japan, in Tokyo, maybe Harajuku district. I chose it because there are many high school students, college students who frequent that area. And if you ask them to name you a scientist, would they be able to come up with any names? Maybe. Let me harbor a guess. If they did, would they suggest someone like Albert Einstein? Probably, because we are familiar, all of us, with the formula E equals mc squared. Or how about if they were biologists like myself? They might suggest Charles Darwin. He gave us the theory of evolution. Maybe if they watch a very popular sitcom called Big Bang Theory, or even better, if they support a Korean boy band called Big Bang, they might be able to tell you Stephen Hawking, who recently left us. Then you might challenge them a bit further and you say, I don't see any women here. Give me a name of a female scientist. I'm a woman scientist myself, so I feel strongly about that. They will say, okay, Marie Curie. She's, after all, probably the most famous women scientist alive, having discovered a couple of elements and the first woman to win a Nobel Prize. So notice anything on the screen. Do you see any scientists from Asia? Not quite. So I think that's why I have a job. My job is to promote and make popular science from Asia. My job is to highlight all the good science from Asia, not just science, good science from Asia. I'm not interested in the bad science, just the good science. And so my job is to promote science from Asia. So I want this to be something that can roll off their tongues. If they were to name an Asian scientist, would they know the work of Tu Youyou, who won a Nobel Prize recently for the discovery of a drug that can be used to treat malaria, known as artemisinin? Would they? That's my question. Would they be able to tell us of the work of Udupi Rao, who was one of the pioneers of the space scene in India? I hope so. That would be my dream. And because this is a Japanese audience, I would love for all of them to know about the great work done by Professor Shinya Yamanaka on induced pluripotent stem cells, making it possible to just take the cells off my arm, skin cells, and convert them into stem cells for the study of very rare diseases like ALS, for example. And how about the work of Dr. Kosuke Morita? He discovered element 113, which he named nihonium. And it's the first element to be discovered in an Asian country. So this is information that all our high schoolers, all our college students should know. And that's why I have a job to do. And that's why I'm here today. So maybe we can take a step back. Let's talk about more broadly, what is our role here today as science communicators? And I think we play a rather important one. So we take very complicated and important information like that of a new immunotherapy. How about CRISPR-Cas gene editing and latest discoveries in climate change? We take all of these stories that cannot be understood by a general public, and we make it possible for them to understand. But then again, science communication is more than just an exercise in storytelling. We are not just storytellers. I think we do way more than that. I think we make it possible for a mother, when shopping for groceries, and fathers, to know what to put in their shopping cart and what to feed their children. With the information we provide them about health, we make it possible for people to know what goods to buy based on the practices of that company, or rather what goods not to buy if they engage in unsustainable environmental practices. And for some of us, it also helps us with our political choices, the party we decide to vote for. Because oftentimes, some parties are notorious for being anti-science or anti-environment. So we help the general public make important decisions for their families, for the earth, and for everything around us. So we may not be superheroes, but we have a superhero-sized job to do. And not only do we share information, we also dispel misinformation, and we could not be even more important than right now, where I think the word fake news is all over the internet. We need to dispel information provided by the anti-vaxxers, people who do not believe in vaccination. We need to dispel misinformation by quack doctors who peddle drugs that are not scientifically proven. We need to help the general public understand why chemotherapies, certain chemotherapies and radiotherapies and so on, are validated by FDA evidence and clinical evidence. We need to dispel misinformation by politicians who hold sway in their court, who tell us that climate change is, after all, a construct of trade wars. And not only must we, rile people up, we must also calm them down. Because there are some very famous people telling us that AI is more dangerous than nuclear warheads. We may want to play a role in calming the public down about their fears about science and technology. So we have multiple roles. So therefore, it's more than just an exercise in storytelling. I would like to share with you a little bit about my personal journey in science communication. I'll run you through that, and after that, I will also share with you a call to action for everyone in this room. So I did not begin as a science communicator. I was trained as a scientist. In fact, I was on the tenure track program as an assistant professor in Singapore, and I left. I left to take my dream and my calling and take it to life. I had been doing this while I was in the tenure track as a faculty, but I decided that I could not make this work without being dedicated to it full time. So I really started off very simply and very modestly in my pajamas, in my living room. I started a blog as a PhD student and later a postdoc at MIT. So this is not how it looked like before. This is a lot better. Along the way, I received seed funding from an international science publisher called World Scientific Publishing. They have offices in the US, UK, and even in Japan. Because of that funding, we were able to go into a variety of platforms. We started, of course, in print and online, and now we are also on social media, mainly on Facebook, also on Twitter. And now we do a lot of what we call e-newsletters. We find that increasingly people prefer to get summarized news sent to their mailbox. And I also have been very keen to do more events, as we now find that having a personal touch matters a lot to our readers. So here's just a snapshot of some of the covers. I thought I should give a shout out to my wonderful creative designers at Asian Scientists who are watching right now. Hello. I'm sorry he's got cut off, but Professor Shuji Nakamura, who discovered blue LED light, is just, you can see his lips over there. And then, of course, we have our very beautiful Kirobo, the robot who went to space. We cover a lot of Japanese science in general. So here's all of our editorial, design, marketing teams. We're all looking happy because we won an award for Science Media of the Year. This is in Singapore, of course. I thought I wanted to just shout out to all the amazing professors who've accepted interviews from us. Here they are, and many more I cannot put on the screen. These are Japanese professors. So we were happily producing our magazine. We were having events, we were doing print and online, and then we started to get lots of curious organizations knocking on our doors. They said, can you help us? We don't have a science comms team in-house, or they were very small. And we realized that we could do a lot for our community. So we started servicing, and they also paid our salaries, paid the bills. Our clients include MNCs, research institutes, and government agencies. So just to give you a sense of what we've done, we've helped them execute white papers, reports, magazines, and books. We've also done a lot of scientific press release writing and distribution. I would say every week, since we have Eureka Alert here, probably one press release written by my team goes online, but you may not know it's done by my team because the university is the one that releases it. We help many organizations with their website and social media management. I think after a while they realized that having a website isn't easy because you need an editorial calendar, which is on a daily and weekly and monthly basis. So we do a lot of the grunt work for them. And then more recently, we started to do a lot of focus groups and public opinion surveys. I think right now, organizations are not happy just to send news away. They want to get feedback. They want data. And that's why we have been engaged to reach out to the public and find out what they want and what they need. So this is what we do in general. But it's not just work, there's also play. So in 2015, we launched the Asian Scientist Writing Prize. It came back in 2017. There'll be another edition 2019. We get some entries from Japan, but not enough. So the reason here is we felt that it wasn't enough just to write as professional journalists. We wanted to encourage young people, amateurs, and even professors and postdocs, graduate students to write. And we received many entries, and here are just some of the winners from the 2017 event. Some speakers thought about the importance of having art and in the communication of science. Who better to tell us that than Dr. Jorge Cham? He's quite a famous cartoonist, former NASA roboticist. He left research to focus exclusively on PhD comics. So we flew him into Singapore. We had a massive packed audience, and there were designers, students, illustrators, writers. The crowd was so varied, and they were all really interested to hear from Dr. Cham. I'll use the remaining time to share with you a little bit of data from a study that I carried out. I think I had been doing this project of mine for about 5 years when I said, the general public is this black hole that I write for. The information goes out, but who are they? So I wanted to learn more, at least in my backyard in Singapore, who this general public was, what was their attitudes, their views, and their level of scientific literacy. So I looked around, and I realized that in the US and the UK and Australia and other countries, they had been doing studies on the population annually, and you could find data going back to the 1950s and even before. So that was incredible. But nothing like that had been done in Singapore, where I live. So I worked with Associate Professor Shirley Ho of Nanyang Technological University. She's a public opinion scholar, and we had a grant at IRB to carry out a first large-scale survey of 1,000 Singaporeans and permanent residents on the views and attitudes towards science. We just wanted to get information on it. The questionnaire was more than 80 questions, so I'm not going to bore you with all the answers. Just share with you some interesting bits from it. On a macro level, we found that they all supported science in general. They thought that science is useful in keeping our economy competitive. So they supported science on a macro level. On a micro level or personal level, they too supported science. They thought science was making their lives healthier, easier, and more comfortable. So that was good. They were supportive on a macro and micro level. So let's take a look at some of my concerns when it came to scientific knowledge. This is just like a pop quiz, really. Almost 60%, if you count the don't know and false crowd, are not quite sure or do not think GM food is safe for consumption. I think this is a challenge, an opportunity for science communicators. Why is it that they are afraid of GM food? Here's where we come in. Antibiotics will kill viruses as well as bacteria. They were split. So half the crowd was going to take antibiotics for something that was viral. So that will lead to antibiotic resistance. So this is a health communication opportunity. And then radioactive milk can be made safe by boiling it. Okay, I get this one because Singapore does not have nuclear energy, so maybe they don't know too much about radioactivity. How about the last one? Human beings as we know them today developed from earlier species of animals. About 1/3 didn't quite agree with that. You know what it tells me? It tells me that the Singaporean population is maybe quite religious. So that was something I should know about because they come with their biases. And as science communicators, we focus on the facts sometimes. But sometimes the facts are not enough because this is what they were brought up to, taught, and the facts are not just enough to sway them. So we should think of some other persuasive methods. So just to summarize the 3 things that concern me in this survey, these are the 3 answers that our surveyors, our respondents said. We depend too much on science and not enough on faith. It turns out that the Singaporean population is either quite spiritual or quite religious. Science makes our way of life change too fast. So they wanted things to slow down a bit. With AI, machine learning, robotics, drones, I can see how people could be afraid. And that's where science communicators can calm them down and give them the confidence. And finally, this is something that I would like to point out. 80% of our respondents wanted to talk to politicians or policymakers. Only 50% wanted to talk to scientists. They'd rather talk to a politician than to an expert who developed the science. This statistic has been reported in the Straits Times, my local newspaper, and many other forums. I think this is a huge concern to me as a scientist, as a science communicators. Are the scientists seen as someone who they cannot understand or cannot converse with or unavailable for comment? So I think we should focus on that and explore how scientists can do better. So we are doing follow-up studies on this. For one, we are studying the role of scientists as public intellectuals, which basically means what role or roles do these scientists play in society? Or have we ceded the authority over to politicians, lobbyists, celebrities, talk show hosts? I hope not. I hope we play a big role in society. We are also studying how scientists use social media. Having been trained in the UK and the US, I can say that scientists use social media a lot more in the West than in Asia. So we want to study how that practice takes place in Asia. And I'd like to end on a positive note and also a call to action for Asia. For one, I would like to start with my call to action for scientists. I think some of us here are scientists as well, or represent scientists in their universities. I think that scientists should at least acquire some form of media training, preferably from this crowd. I don't mean they're going to appear on TV or, I just think it would give them the confidence to accept requests from editors and journalists and to talk more confidently about their research. I also strongly believe there should be some sort of institutional incentive in their grants, say NSF grants in the US, have a 3% outreach requirement. I don't see that in Singapore, at least, or in many parts of Asia. And I think that scientists should be incentivized themselves in their annual performance assessments to focus on outreach and education. If you look at a general performance assessment that I've actually filled out myself, they will talk about how much money you brought in, how many high-impact papers and which journal they are in, and then right at the bottom dismal, they will say, did you do any outreach? So I think that should be reversed. Okay. And cultural shifts in communication preferences. In Asia especially, I find that if you try to talk to a junior scientist, they will push you up to their boss, and then the boss, and the boss. So you don't really get to speak to the person you really want to speak to. I think it's also a form of courtesy, but I wish that scientists would speak to us at all levels, instead of asking, say, the PR rep to speak to us. And lastly, this is for science communicators. I think this is an exact example of what I mean. I think we should have more national and regional forums for us to learn the best practices in science communication. Maybe on an informal basis, I wish I have more friends who are science communicators, all of you here. Because I think we can trade tips, we can fact check, we can learn some information from each other that we would otherwise be unable to find. And lastly, I think this is a little bit more harder to achieve, but could there be some kind of industry standards or code of ethics? I think we think of journalistic standards as an example, but I think science communicators should develop some form of ethical standards. For example, is it right to say that a cure has been found when really they just made it possible in vitro in a petri dish in a particular lab at this temperature today? I think we need to think about how the general public responds to the words we use, especially. And on that note, I'd like to thank the organizers and the sponsors for making it possible, and also my affiliated organizations. And I hope to discuss more with you at the panel discussion later. Thank you very much. Thank you.